What if I told you most live albums are set up to fail? Not because the artists lack talent, not because the performances fall short, but because the modern music industry quietly treats live recordings as an afterthought. In the streaming era, studio polish dominates, algorithms reward singles, and live albums are often dismissed as nostalgic side projects. And yet, one Filipino group challenged that narrative. SB19 didn't just release a live album, they reignited demand for the raw, unfiltered concert experience. They didn't just chart, they didn't just trend. They proved that authenticity still scales, that fans crave real vocals and real moments. And in doing so, they shattered the so-called live album curse in spectacular fashion. And the data backs it up. Today, we're breaking down how SB19 accomplished what even global superstars often struggle to pull off, why this milestone goes far beyond charts and streaming numbers, and what it signals for the future of P-pop and the wider global music industry. If you value deep industry analysis, like, share, and subscribe as we dive in, because this story is much bigger than one group. Let's begin with an uncomfortable truth the industry rarely admits. Live albums almost never perform well. In the streaming era, they're considered risky, commercially fragile, and algorithmically disadvantaged from day one. Historically, live albums struggle because of three structural disadvantages baked into the modern industry. First, fans have already heard the songs. Streaming culture conditions listeners to replay polished studio versions rather than raw, imperfect performances. Second, major platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube Music prioritize clean production, balanced mixing, and radio-friendly consistency, which pushes live recordings down the algorithmic ladder as non-essential content. And third, labels often treat live albums as side projects, low marketing budgets, minimal playlist pitching, and limited promotional cycles, almost as if they expect them to underperform before they're even released into the market. Most live albums receive minimal promotion, dropped quietly between major eras and treated as filler rather than defining artistic statements. The numbers consistently reinforce this pattern. Across global markets, live albums typically sell 30 to 70% less than their studio counterparts, rarely debut high on major charts, and often vanish from rankings within days of release. Even legendary artists face this uphill battle, which highlights something crucial about the format itself. Some of the biggest names in the world have released live projects that failed to replicate their studio dominance, with many debuting outside the top 50 despite massive fan bases, extensive touring power, and strong brand recognition across multiple continents and streaming platforms. Streaming numbers for live albums typically drop sharply after week one, with fan interest fading quickly unless the release is tied to a major tour film or global event. In most cases, live projects are viewed as niche products made primarily for hardcore supporters rather than mainstream audiences. So when SB19 announced a live album connected to their kickoff concert, the industry expectation was predictable. This is for the fans, it won't generate significant numbers, and it won't compete with studio releases. Analysts assumed limited playlist traction, modest chart impact, and short-lived streaming momentum. But that assumption proved completely wrong, setting the stage for a far more disruptive outcome than anyone anticipated. What SB19 did differently was redefine the purpose of a live album. They didn't release a typical concert recording, they released a moment. The key distinction is this: their live album wasn't built on nostalgia, it was built on narrative. It wasn't a random compilation, a bonus drop, or a contractual filler project. It was positioned as a milestone, a public statement, a receipt of evolution. Every track felt deliberate, every vocal carried urgency, every transition documented growth in real time. The crowd energy amplified emotional stakes, and the imperfections added authenticity. Fans didn't just hear the performances, they experienced a chapter in SB19's journey unfolding live, and that emotional investment changed everything. But emotion alone doesn't break industry curses, data does, and the numbers are what made analysts pay attention. SB19's live album didn't just quietly enter the charts, it competed across multiple markets, debuting alongside major studio releases instead of being sidelined as a niche drop. More importantly, it sustained its presence longer than expected, maintaining momentum beyond the typical first-week spike that most live albums experience. It even outperformed several newly released projects from other artists during the same tracking period. For a live album, especially in today's streaming-driven ecosystem, that level of competitive chart performance is exceptionally rare and statistically disruptive.
Second, streaming behavior told an even bigger story. Live albums typically experience a sharp drop after day one, but SB19 demonstrated strong multi-day consistency, with repeat listens sending a powerful signal to platform algorithms. That kind of retention drives playlist traction organically because it tells services that listeners aren't just sampling, they're staying, replaying, and engaging deeply. Third, the international response elevated the release beyond local impact. The album generated media mentions, reaction content, and cross-border discussions across multiple regions. For a live album, especially from an emerging global act, to sustain streaming momentum and spark international attention simultaneously is extremely rare, and it signaled structural demand rather than temporary hype. Here's where SB19 executed a strategic masterstroke. They ensured fans would never see the live album as a side project. Instead, it was positioned as essential listening, almost a cultural checkpoint. If you weren't at the kickoff concert, this album became your way to catch up. That show wasn't just another date on a tour schedule. It marked the beginning of a new era, a declaration of independence, and a proof of concept moment for their evolution. The live album functioned as a timestamp, a shared emotional archive, even a badge of pride within the fandom. Fans didn't stream it passively or casually, they streamed it with purpose, almost defensively, as if to say, you need to hear this to fully understand why SB19 matters right now in this shifting global industry landscape. That mindset is powerful and rare. What makes SB19 different isn't just vocal ability or choreography precision, it's context. Fans understand the years of struggle, the risks they embraced, the fight for independence, and the weight of representing P-pop on a global stage. So when listeners hear strained high notes or the roar of the crowd bleeding into the mix, they don't interpret it as imperfection. They hear evidence of effort, sacrifice, and authenticity. That emotional framing changes consumption behavior. It drives higher track completion rates, repeat streams, deeper fan discussions, and organic word-of-mouth promotion across platforms. The data may not fully quantify sentiment, but it clearly reflects its impact, setting the stage for an even bigger industry implication next. Why this moment matters goes far beyond SB19 alone. This isn't just a milestone for one group, it's a signal to the entire music industry. Their success proves that live albums can succeed when treated with intention, care, and strategic positioning. It directly challenges three entrenched beliefs: that live albums can't generate meaningful revenue, that only perfectly polished studio recordings sell at scale, and that non-Western acts cannot reshape established music formats. By breaking the so-called live album curse, SB19 exposed a long-standing industry habit of underestimating fan engagement, streaming behavior, and emotional storytelling. Now, artists across Asia and beyond are watching closely, recognizing that this approach could redefine global expectations for live releases. What this means for P-pop's global future is monumental. Historically, the group has often been framed as emerging, local, or experimental, but moments like the success of this live album shift that perception entirely. Achieving international impact proves the audience is global, the demand is genuine, and the fandom is not only active, but highly organized, disciplined, and influential. SB19 didn't wait for external validation. They created circumstances that forced recognition. The real reason this strategy worked goes beyond charts, streams, or rankings. It's rooted in emotional investment, fan loyalty, cultural resonance, and a meticulously crafted narrative that turns every listener into a participant in the story. SB19 didn't release a live album that felt optional, extra, or like filler. They made one that felt absolutely necessary. And when fans perceive necessity, they don't just listen. They show up, stream repeatedly, share passionately, defend relentlessly, and amplify organically. That's how industry curses get shattered. SB19 didn't just drop a live album, they fundamentally rewrote the rules for what a live release can achieve. They proved that raw performances can be powerful, live recordings can compete with studio projects, and P-pop can lead the conversation rather than follow it. If this is only the beginning, the global music industry needs to pay attention quickly, because SB19 isn't just breaking curses, they're establishing entirely new standards, benchmarks, and expectations for Asian artists everywhere.